Matt Montegrosso here, creator of Xenoplicity and the Q system that it runs on. Today's video are more reasons why D&D sucks, why it's awful, why you should not play it. Play a different game. There are so many great games out there. You owe it to yourself and to your table to pick up other games, to learn other games, to play other games. Don't just play D20 level-based games. Don't just play D&D. Play other things. There are so many good games, guys. And you are doing yourself and your table a disservice if you only play one game. Let's talk about Magic. Spell lists, hate them. Hate the way Magic works in D&D. D&D is not the only game that does this. There's a lot of games that kind of mirror D&D in this regard, and it's unfortunate because a lot of times in these games, Magic comes off as very rigid, very mechanical. It is very restrictive. It's very boring. It doesn't foster creativity and imagination at the table the way you would want a Magic system to do. There are a lot of good Magic systems out there in the world. Well, I say a lot. There are good Magic systems out there in the world, but D&D is not one of them. Good Magic systems that come to mind: Ars Magica, Mage the Ascension, Xenoplicity, my own game. I have a great Magic system in my game. I want players to be creative in how they use Magic at the table. I want Magic to be mysterious and dangerous and powerful. I want it to be unpredictable. I want it to be something like, when I present a witch or a wizard as an enemy to my player characters, I do not want the player characters to have any idea what spells they might get thrown in their direction. I want it to feel dangerous and mysterious and unknown. And the thing about spell lists is you don't get that with spell lists. If the only way you can use Magic are ways that are clearly defined and laid out in very rigid, specific ways by the game developers, then you have shut down all creativity regarding all the other ways it could be used. Okay, I don't think this is the best way to handle Magic. I think it's sad that the majority of gamers out there, this is what they're used to, and this is the culture that has been built around them that they have just accepted. Why? Why do you need to take multiple spells that all relate to fire to just do various things with fire? I don't understand that. I don't get it. More to the point, let's say you have a wizard and they didn't take any fire related spells, but they have fireball. Okay, that's the one spell they took. That was that. And then at the end of the day, they want to do a campfire. Can they use their fireball spell to make a campfire? Well, some game masters might say, yeah, sure, why not? Okay, and that's fine. But that's not how the rules work with Fireball. That's not how the game actually is designed to function. The right answer, the real answer according to the rules, is no, you can't. Because if you go to shoot a fireball at the campfire, you're gonna blow the campfire up. It's gonna be a 20-foot radius where damage gets dealt to anyone standing around that area. And here's my point. Like, you allow the fireball spell to actually not be cast as a fireball spell, but instead just to kind of have fire erupt from a spot on the ground in a 5-foot area or what have you, and you allow that night. Well, then what about tomorrow when they only have the fireball spell and there's an enemy standing in a spot and he says, well, you know what? Instead of casting a fireball, can I have fire erupt from the ground and put him on fire? Basically the same thing I did with the campfire, but now I want to do it in combat. And so often, even if the game master allowed it in downtime at the campsite, they're not going to allow that in the fight because, again, it's just not the way the mechanics and the rules are set up in the game. And to me, this is problematic. This is an issue because you've created something so restrictive and so detailed in its description that to use it outside of that is to actually break the game rules. There are other spells in D&D that are designed for starting campfires or to erupt flames. That it's not the fireball spell, right? Sure, it can catch things on fire, but it's not its intended purpose. I prefer systems that don't hammer down the specifics of how Magic can be used as much, because I want Magic to feel magical at the table. Okay, so Magic in D&D sucks. What about some other issues? Let's talk about classes. Classes in D&D suck. They're awful. They're, again, just like with spells, they are restrictive, they are boring. They shoehorn every character into the same kind of template where there's really no deviation. The thing about a class is I understand its appeal, and on some level it allows there to be kind of uniqueness to each character at the table if everyone's playing a different class. The problem is that, you know, if you've played a fighter, you've played a fighter, because it's very rigid. They're really limiting in what they allow you know, players to make at the table. I understand that there's subclasses, and so you can kind of like, you know, customize a character to be one specific way for like flavor or theme. The problem is that it's a counterintuitive thing. The more specific, the more detailed you get, the less useful something is in a tabletop role-playing game. So if you hammer out that there's 3 different types of fighter, well, so now you've just limited it to 3 types of fighter. And, you know, maybe I want to be a fighter, but I just want to play someone that's like a barbarian. And then the pushback to that is, well, just play a barbarian. I don't want to play a barbarian. I wanted to play a fighter. I just wanted to be a barbarian. You see what I'm saying? Like, there was a time in previous editions of even D&D where there just was a fighter or a class like that, where you could just kind of use flavor and narration to be any kind of fighter you wanted to be, right? I think that's a better approach, but we've gotten away from that, and now we're to a point where everything is so rigid, everything is so structured, and I think we've lost something. The more you do that, the more you lose, okay? And just like with Magic, the more you hammer it down, the less useful it is. So I don't like classes. And really, the classes and the level system, the way it breaks it down with what you get when you get it, you know, a level 3 fighter is a level 3 fighter, and there's this illusion of choice and different things you might be able to pick and select. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. It's boring, it's dull, it makes every character kind of same-o. I don't like it. It puts a bad taste in my mouth. Let's talk about encounter balance. Counterbalance is a whole nonsense idea. It's hogwash, okay? You don't need counter imbalance. You don't need to balance everything in the game. Not everything in the game should be balanced. You want a world where these characters feel like they're living in a real world, a living world. You don't get that if everything is balanced. It's not a video game. It's not the way the game is designed to be played. If a dragon flies over top and you're level 1, well, then find a solution. Run for the trees, hide under a rock, find a way to talk and negotiate with the dragon. You know, you're probably not going to fight it, but maybe you do. But the point is that you don't just delete the dragon. You don't just delete it and say, well, it can't be there because you're too low level. What a boring world that is, if the only things you experience are things you're qualified to experience. And also there's this idea, well, maybe it's a dragon, but maybe it's a baby dragon. So like, as with a low level character, the only kind of dragon I can encounter is a baby dragon, or like a young one. Like, again, it breaks immersion. It doesn't make any sense. It's not how the real world works. Sometimes you encounter people and creatures in life that are just far superior and far greater than you are. And you know what you need to do in those situations? You need to find a solution. Maybe you run, maybe you get help, maybe you hide. Maybe you don't try to fight something that you know can kill you. But at the end of the day, like, what you don't do is you just don't delete that idea out of the game world. You just, you know, it's up to the players and how they interact with that. And yeah, sometimes that means you might get a total party kill. But this idea, in D&D especially, that everything has to be balanced, that there's these complex calculations that D&D wants you to make, where you can figure out what the encounter rating is supposed to be. I mean, dude, that is ridiculous. That is some nonsense. I am not going to be pulling out a calculator and doing some kind of complex math to try to make sure that everything is perfectly balanced in the game world. If you need to do that, you're just play a different game. I mean, it's just awful. Another thing that's awful in D&D is death. It is so hard to die in this new edition of D&D. If you are in a situation where you're reduced to 0 hit points, now you have to make these 3 different rolls to avoid death. And if you fail 3 rolls in a row, then you're going to die. Talk about some nonsense. Here's the thing. If you make death so hard to achieve, then what you've done is you've told the players that they shouldn't expect to die, okay? You've set a bad expectation in the game, okay? It's bad game design. You want a game where death comes quick and it can happen at any time. This sets the proper expectation that your character can die, that he might die, that he's likely to die, and that that's okay. Okay, because you are more than your character. You are a player playing a character. The character is not you. You are not your character. If you die, you make another character. I'll tell you a story. There was a game we were playing in the fantasy trip where one of my players, he makes his character. They go into a room with this dungeon. A flying spear shoots through the air, and he just nails him right in the chest. He gets pinned to the wall, instant death. So he's dead. So what does he do? He has to make another character. So he makes another character. He walks in the same room to join his friends that are in there fighting the threats in there. Another flying spear shoots through the room. It's a trap. It flies through, and again, it impales him right in the chest. It's a critical hit, and he dies a second time. So both of his characters are just dead right next to each other, both with impaled spears. So what does he do? He makes another character. He runs into the room, and this time he gets past the trap, and he joins the fight. He loved this third character just as much as he did the other two. He had just as much fun. It was just as enjoyable. But here's the thing. He didn't cry about it. He didn't whine about it. He got over it, and he made another character, and he keeps playing. That mentality is the proper mentality. It's a game. It's no different than playing Uno or Monopoly or any other game you might pull out of your closet or off of a shelf and play. Characters die. Characters lose. It's not a big deal. But you make it a big deal if it's so hard for you to die. Because you see, when death is easy, that sets an expectation at the table that death is easy, that death can happen, that it's something to be expected. And if it's expected and you've set that expectation, well, then people aren't surprised when it does happen. And they're not going to lose their attitude. Seriously, people playing this game should either be teenagers or adults. There is no reason to have a player lose their attitude and get up from the table upset, or even get angry at a friend because they die in the game. It is a fictional game. It's a game of play pretend. You can make another character. You got to get over that. But D&D doesn't want you to get over that. D&D wants you to have that kind of weird connection with a fictional character to the point where they want to make it so where it's almost impossible to die. And again, I just have no patience for this. This is nonsense. D&D is an objectively bad game. There are lots of bad things about the system, about the way the game works. Even the dice mechanics in the game are just poor. A D20 is just a poor, resolution mechanic. Every chance on that die is an equal 5% chance. There are better ways to do this. I mean, if you're playing a 3D6 system, there's a bell curve that is going to feel more natural, and it's going to feel more immersive than a D20 that's going to be very random, very chaotic in the results that you get. So anyway, guys, these are just some more reasons why I absolutely hate D&D and why you should too.